I'm Christopher Clark, and I'm traveling the world to discover its true treasures, the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The baffling complexity of India, the depth of its history, the endless layers of language, culture and myth have always fascinated me. India is a study in contrasts, rich and poor, sacred and profane, thronging megacities and dreaming landscapes full of ancient trees. Nearly 1.4 billion people live here, and yet there's a mysterious feeling of unity. What holds it all together? India is a voice that speaks to us, and not just in its hundreds of languages and countless dialects. This country speaks to our senses, with all the power of the rulers and religions, all the peoples and cultures that have left their mark on this enormous subcontinent over the millennia. India is the sound of a cosmos, much more than the sum of its parts. And that's what makes this country at once so rich and so bewildering. Some of the most important traces of the country's past can be found in the locations that UNESCO has named as World Heritage Sites. Same kisi ki pratiksha nahi karta, says the Hindu proverb. Time waits for no man. On that note, I'd better get cracking. My journey will take me to Elephanta Island in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Mumbai, to Rajasthan, to Delhi and to Agra with the Taj Mahal, and after a detour to visit the tigers of Sundarbans National Park, to the Himalayan foothills. But it begins on the Ganges in Varanasi. If you want to understand India, Varanasi should be your first port of call. It's the spiritual heart of the country, on the banks of the Ganges, the river gifted to the earth by the goddess Ganga. The goddess offers the hope of life after death and the cleansing of sins, and the candles and lotus blossoms that float on her waters are physical prayers. Pilgrims have been traveling to this city for more than 2,500 years. All of them want to bathe in the Ganges, and many would like to die and be cremated here as well. This spirituality shapes the entire country. You encounter it at every step along the way, but especially on the shores of its waters. India's rivers are its true temples. They are the arteries of India's sacred geography. They've long been considered holy since many years before the first temple was ever constructed. And for people here, they provide a sense of belonging. That's especially palpable in Varanasi. Here, the Ganges is the equivalent of a cathedral in the Christian world. When you're in it, you are close to the gods. That's why this river is a common point of reference for all Hindus. But the very name of this country, India, also stems from a river, the Indus. Rivers have always shaped the life and culture of this subcontinent. Indians revere not only the Ganges, but also the Brahmaputra, the Indus, and many other rivers. Rivers play an important role in nearly all religious rituals, and they're not just a symbol of life. In many places, they are its literal source. But now I'm heading for an island off the west coast of India. We take a boat from Mumbai, once known as Bombay, a city built on islands and reclaimed from the sea. The roots of Hinduism, and consequently the roots of India, can be explored at a UNESCO World Heritage Site on Rarapuri Island, which was later called Elephanta, in the Arabian Sea. After we've traveled 7 nautical miles, the island slowly emerges from the morning haze. The cut stone sculptures here mainly date back to the era of the Kalachuri dynasty, which ruled here in the 6th and 7th centuries. But Elephanta was always a spiritual place. The small Buddhist stupa mounds on the island date back to 200 BC. Religious processions and sacrificial rituals were part of everyday life here, and to honor Shiva, 6 enormous cave temples were carved from the basalt rocks. The largest of them is 40 meters deep with a ceiling up to 5 meters high. I wonder what awaits me here. The temple was created to honor Shiva, and its architecture and the symbols found here invoke the divine presence of the greatest of all gods. 2 stone guardians watch over the center of the temple. Lord Shiva is like a kind of cosmic jigsaw puzzle. You can put him together, you can take him apart, and even the individual pieces of the puzzle possess the fullness of his power. This, for example, is the Shiva Lingam, the penis of Lord Shiva. And here especially, you can feel his creative power. Hindu belief and symbology are finely rendered in the overall planning of the caves. The layout, including the pillar components, is a landmark of rock-cut architecture. The combination of aesthetic beauty and sculptural technique reached an apogee at the Elephanta Caves. Elephanta is one of the hearts of India's spiritual life. UNESCO named this place a World Heritage Site in recognition of its relationship with the origins of the ancient Hindu religion. And here we meet Lord Shiva, one of the most important divine powers in the Hindu cosmos. Shiva unites all contradictions within himself. But why is he shown here with 3 faces? Because he creates, maintains, and destroys. He embodies the harmony of the world in contradiction. There's nothing monolithic about Hinduism. Its forms are endlessly various, but they always come back to an order of the world and of the people in it that is enclosed within an eternal cycle. Shiva appears here as a being between man and woman, with Nandi, the bull, a gate guardian deity. The pillars symbolize the universe that Shiva destroys in a cosmic dance, only to rebuild it again. Everything in the cave is focused on this eternal cycle of life, but nothing else in this religion is set in stone. Hinduism has never been centered on a single holy book full of commandments and prohibitions and strict injunctions in the manner of Christianity and Islam. The faith and the faithful themselves are an open book that is continuously being written. This process still shapes the country today. 80% of Indians are Hindus. The desire for contact with the divine world continues unabated in India. In fact, it's growing in importance even for younger generations. This religion thrives on recurring rituals that also shape the everyday lives of Hindus. Young priests, known as pandits, swing lamps. The fire links this world and the spirit world. When the faithful come together for ceremonies like the Ganga Aarti, it feels like a fun fair, and it's just as loud as if the revelers want to make sure that the gods up in heaven can hear them. When the writer and the world traveler Mark Twain was in Varanasi, he believed he could sense the roots of all religions here. The city, he wrote, was older than history, older than tradition, older than legend itself. While life on the banks of the Ganges revolves around piety and spirituality, the state of Rajasthan is all about power and beauty. In the 18th century, the Maharaja of Jaipur commissioned the construction of the water palace Taj Mahal just outside the gates of his city on an artificial lake. It was a pleasure palace and a luxurious perch for the duck hunting he enjoyed so much. Jaipur is the capital of Rajasthan, a colorful and somewhat chaotic metropolis with more than 4 million residents. This place brings together all the cultures of India. The skyline is full of temples and minarets. Modern and ancient things are jumbled together in a maze of roads that appear to have no names. In Jaipur, you can learn, in a very first-hand and visceral way, just how Indian street life works. The heart of Jaipur is still the Maharaja's palace, built by the same Rajput dynasty that founded this royal state. Their origins remain a mystery even today. The Rajputs, which roughly translates as sons of kings, lived together in clans that they called brotherhoods. They were exceptionally gifted, proud warriors with an elaborate code of honor, and they saw themselves as descendants of the gods, bearers of a tradition as old as the world itself. For Hindus, this attitude must have seemed quite arrogant, but depictions from the time indicate that the princes really did view themselves as divine. They lived in the many kingdoms that once made up Rajasthan. With the Rajasthanis, a unique and independent civilization arose within India, with impregnable fortresses whose interiors they built into exquisite fairy tale palaces. These ruling families reigned for 1,000 years. They successfully battled the Persians and the Turks, the powerful Moguls, and the sultans of Delhi. Their kings, the Maharajas, were always the embodiment of romantic chivalry. Rajasthan is crisscrossed with walls, relics of an era of never-ending wars that demanded the construction of strong defenses high up on the mountain peaks. They wind their way through this rugged countryside. The long wall around Fort Kumbhalgarh is known as India's Great Wall, a reference to the Chinese fortification system. There were 23 kingdoms in total, each ruled by a Raja. The most important mountain fortresses are cleverly distributed across Rajasthan, a territory approximately the size of Germany. UNESCO named the forts as World Heritage Sites, partly because they demonstrate how the Rajputs protected their knightly culture from external hostilities between the 11th and 18th centuries. Islamic conquerors in particular were becoming a threat. And here you can see how together they form a protective ring, always commanding the highest ground. The Amber Fort, with its massive walls of marble and sandstone, is one of the largest and most beautiful mountain palaces in Rajasthan. Today, Amber is one of the most visited spots in India, along with the Taj Mahal. These elephants are used to carry tourists up to the Amber Fort. India has now decided that this trade should be shut down. It's now illegal to capture elephants in the wild and to place them in the service of human beings in this way. It's regarded as cruel, inappropriate for these animals, and I think actually I'd rather walk. Inside and out, Amber Fort is the perfect symbol of power, an ideal symbiosis between an impregnable fortress and a sumptuous palace. There were audience halls, treasure chambers, pavilions, and elaborate gardens, and safe behind these massive walls, the ruling families lived luxurious lives. The Sheesh Mahal, the elaborate hall of mirrors, natural light is reflected by tens of thousands of tiny Venetian mirrors. At night, the entire hall could be lit with a single candle. This is India's Versailles. The Amber Fort served as the Maharaja's seat of power for almost 700 years, until they moved to the new capital of their kingdom, Jaipur. Officially, there haven't been any Maharajas in India for half a century. Even the legendary wealth of these former rulers is largely gone. The Maharajas lost most of the gold and jewels they had once had in abundance, as well as their palaces and estates. But some families still remain extremely wealthy. The current Maharaja of Jaipur ascended the throne at 12. He's 21 today. When he's not playing polo all over the world, he celebrates traditional festivals with the people in the courtyard of the palace. The fire is intended to drive off evil spirits, and everyone is welcome to take some fire home with them on a wooden stick. Behind the palace walls, there are still relics of the old times. This Ganga Jali is the largest object made of solid silver anywhere in the world. It was built in 1894 by the then Maharaja to store holy Ganges water for his use and the use of his family. In 1902, when he traveled to England to take part in the coronation of Edward VII, the Maharaja took 2 of these things with him. Fortunately, it was a short visit. The 4,000 litres of stored Ganges water sufficed to cover the Maharaja's needs, which was just as well because he didn't trust the British water supply. The most famous landmark in Jaipur is the Hawa Mahal, the Palace of the Winds. For the numerous ladies of the court who were not permitted to mix with commoners, the palace was a place where they could observe the everyday lives of normal people, which they naturally found very exotic. Jaipur was founded by Maharaja Jai Singh II. He ascended the throne in 1699 when he was just 11 years old, and he went on to reign for nearly half a century. He built this city and he named it after himself, Jaipur. The word Jai wasn't just his name, it also means victory. And Jaipur, this city of victory, became a flourishing metropolis. Over time, the warlike Rajputs became the peace-loving inhabitants of a commercial, urban culture. The pink blush that suffuses this cityscape dates back to 1876, when the British Prince, Albert Edward, visited Jaipur. The then Maharaja ordered that every building be painted pink. And even today, the residents of the old city of Jaipur are required to paint their houses pink. If they don't, the city government does it for them and sends them the bill. Jai Singh's true passion was astronomy. It looks like a modern sculpture park, doesn't it? But this Jantar Mantar was built just under 300 years ago. Along with his palace, Maharaja Jai Singh commissioned the construction of 19 astronomical instruments, including the world's largest sundial. It's 27 meters tall. Jai Singh was not just a popular Maharaja, but also a formidable thinker and inventor. At the age of 13, he developed an irrigation system for the hanging gardens of his fort, and he reached for the stars. He was a passionate astronomer. This enormous observatory was Jai Singh's brainchild. He knew that in astronomy, size matters. The bigger an instrument is, the more precise are its measurements. Even after almost 300 years, everything works here as it did on the first day. And in fact, he was able to prove that local time in Jaipur deviated from the official time mandated by the capital city of Delhi by exactly 2 seconds. These instruments could even predict the intensity of a coming monsoon, which was absolutely invaluable for farming. When the monsoon rains come to India between June and September, the Ganges alone holds more water than all the rivers in Western Europe combined. Only the Amazon exceeds this volume, and the rivers have been depositing sediment at their mouths for millions of years. The fertile earth extends kilometers deep at some points. India's rivers are a vital lifeline. India's fabled riches attracted Islamic rulers from the northwest around the year 1000. And along with these new dynasties, merchants, artists and scholars came to cities like Delhi, bringing an entire culture with them. The buildings and gardens created by architects from the Islamic world are what we might today describe as typically Indian. The powerful Mughal Empire, which spanned almost the entire Indian subcontinent and lasted nearly 300 years, has its roots here. The Muslim rulers were known as Moguls or emperors. They originally came as conquerors from Afghanistan and brought their religion, Islam, with them. It became the second most prevalent faith in India after Hinduism. The Moguls had a highly developed courtly culture. The showpieces of their architecture communicate their unique understanding of death, paradise, and universal rule. Symbols of that understanding can be found everywhere in India. A few kilometers south of Delhi, the archaeological area of Qutb contains funerary buildings and 2 mosques, including the oldest in northern India, built of materials reused from some 20 Brahmin temples. Built in the early 13th century, the red sandstone tower of Qutb Minar is one of the highest minarets in the world, 72.5 meters high. This is why UNESCO made it a World Heritage Site. In the 16th century, the Mughal Empire was firmly established, and its influence could be felt everywhere. The great Mughal Humayun is symbolic of this development. The face of an entire culture changed. This was not Humayun's palace. Rather, it's his modest tomb in Delhi, the earliest example of Mughal architecture in India. A woman commissioned the construction of this mausoleum. She was Humayun's widow. She hired a Persian architect and personally oversaw the works for 9 years. Hamida Banu Begum, that was her name, even set up camp in these gardens to keep an eye on everything. She was the mother of Humayun's son Akbar, the most legendary Mughal of all. When he was off on a conquest or traveling across his extensive empire, he left the business of governing to his highly intelligent mother. It's striking what powerful figures the women of these Islamic dynasties were and how they were revered, and how for a very long time an open and generous form of Islam was practiced here. The people valued religious tolerance, music, literature, and painting. Later on, this tomb served as a model for the Taj Mahal, which was a declaration of love to a woman. The Taj Mahal on the Yamuna River is considered one of the most beautiful examples of Muslim architecture in India. The mausoleum was commissioned by the great Mughal Shah Jahan in memory of his beloved wife. She died in 1631 while giving birth to their 14th child. More than 20,000 laborers worked on the construction of the Taj Mahal. 1,000 elephants transported material to Agra from all over Asia. It's said that the great Mughal had the bricklayers and even the architects' fingers cut off so that they could never create anything as spectacular again. Today, the Taj Mahal is one of the most famous buildings in the world and India's greatest landmark. Without the Humayun Mausoleum in Delhi as a model, it never would have been built, says art historian Ratish Nanda.
This was a political statement more than anything else. It was the grandeur of this structure on a never-before scale, never before seen in the Islamic world, was a statement that Akbar and the Mughals were making, saying, you know, we are here to stay, and this is who we are.
Nothing in this tomb is reminiscent of death. Everything is broken down into geometric shapes, into symmetries, cubes, arches and ornaments. Time is suspended, it has been transformed into space. The dormitory of the Moguls, Humayun's mausoleum was called, because in addition to Humayun himself, the building serves as the final resting place for 160 of his family members. Humayun's son, Akbar the Great, became the most important ruler in the country's history. To the Indians, he must have been what Charlemagne was to the Europeans.
Akbar really employed Islamic geometry as defined in the Holy Quran in the building of this mausoleum and the adjoining gardens. Now, the Holy Quran repeatedly promises the faithful gardens beneath which rivers flow as their final resting space. And it must have been a huge challenge to have flowing water on the plains, but the 4 rivers of paradise were represented by the 4 axial pathways, and each of the 4 quadrants was then subdivided into 8 plots, because paradise is hushed behisht, or 8 spaces of paradise. And what is very interesting is that the building plan is also following the same Quranic geometry, and the plan is the introduction of the hushed behisht plan with 8 chambers around the central chamber built in here. So what is interesting for me at Humayun's tomb is this building has absolutely no precedence anywhere in India or the Islamic world.
How do you preserve an enormous 16th century building that has been named a World Heritage Site? Thousands of craftsmen worked for 6 years to restore the mausoleum, which was on the verge of falling into disrepair. And before the restoration work began, years of research went into determining which stones and paints the original craftsmen had used.
So for us to restore that reminder was extremely important. And we were very fortunate that we were able to figure out the exact patterns of the tile work. But the craft skill having died out, we invited craftsmen from Samarkand and trained local youth in these works. But it took us about 20,000 samples of testing to really make the lapis blue. There are also 5 other colors. There's turquoise blue, yellow, 2 shades of green and white. But lapis blue, which is used predominantly in buildings in this Nizamuddin area, took us about 2 years to work out.
At some point, Akbar the Great relocated his capital. He'd been looking for a silent place for an almost sacred landscape and finally decided to build Fatehpur Sikri near Agra. At the time, there were only small villages and farms, a bucolic atmosphere perfect for contemplation, and the right place for Akbar to establish his new capital. On the way to the palace, there are small hints at his legacy. The Hiran Minaris, covered with stone projections in the form of elephant tusks. For a long time, it was thought to have been erected as a memorial to the Emperor Akbar's favorite elephant, but it was probably used as a milepost. The new city, with Akbar's imposing palace in the middle, became a haven of tolerance. He participated in festivities of other religions and abolished the taxes that non-Muslims had to pay, and he surrounded himself with theologians and priests from a range of different faiths: Muslims, Hindus, and Jesuits. He himself married a Rajput princess, a Hindu woman. For a long time, she was unable to conceive a child, and then the Sufi saint Salim Chishti foretold that she would bear the king their long-desired heir to the throne within the year, and she had 13 more children after that. The saint is still worshipped in a temple on the palace grounds of Fatehpur Sikri, mainly by women who hope to have children. Amidst all the antiquities that bear witness to India's history over the millennia, it's sometimes easy to forget that Indians live in a modern nation. Since 1947, India has been the largest democracy in the world, with a population of 1.4 billion. Nearly 20 million people live on the coast of the Arabian Sea in Mumbai, which used to be known as Bombay, after the Portuguese for Beautiful Bay. The Portuguese were also colonial rulers here for a time. But before the Portuguese arrived, the city was a scattered amalgamation of 7 islands. The natives of the area lived here as fishermen. They formed their own caste by the name of Koli. They helped develop the harbors and the coastlines around Mumbai. The name Mumbai stems from the Mumba Devi temple in Dongri, where the Kolis worshipped their gods.
Can you make a good living out of fishing in these waters?
We have been facing problems. There are barriers or restrictions. No fish to catch. Fishing has not been that rewarding anymore.
It's not just the fishermen who suffer from the pollution. Today, the city is continuously growing. Everyone wants to come to Mumbai, the golden city, in search of a better life. The influence of the British colonial era is also still highly visible in Mumbai. After all, Queen Victoria was also Empress of India. In 1888, the Victoria Terminus was inaugurated to mark the Queen's Golden Jubilee. It's the most impressive example of Victorian Gothic architecture in India, and as part of the Victorian Gothic and Art Deco ensembles of Mumbai, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Half the subcontinent was part of British India back then, and the train station was considered its largest and most important building. With its beautiful stained glass windows, the enormous dome at the top, the extravagant stone vaults, this feels like a place of worship. This is railway station as cathedral. That's how British India celebrated itself in the 19th century. But those days are over, and the train station is no longer called Victoria Terminus. Today it is named after Indian national hero Chhatrapati Shivaji, a Hindu leader from the 17th century, a fitting patron because Shivaji was an early campaigner for Indian independence. Now the terminus is undergoing intense renovation. Pollution from the enormous traffic volumes and industrial pollution in the region have damaged the stone structure of the building. Another problem is the saline air from the sea. Craftsmen from all over India are working on the site, just as they did when the station was built. British architects worked with Indian craftsmen to include Indian architectural traditions, thus forging a new style unique to the city, which was then still called Bombay. In any case, the train station is still in operation today, and it's a key transport hub in India. More than 1,000 trains pass through here every day, heading in every direction across the subcontinent. 2 million passengers per day, vast numbers of whom are commuters from the suburbs. I'm taking the train to Kolkata, and from there I will explore Sundarbans National Park, a UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site. As I leave Mumbai, I can only think about how Victoria, who had originally lent her name to this palatial station, never experienced the wonder and beauty of this subcontinent firsthand, despite the fact that she was Empress of India. In the northeast of India, 7 rivers and hundreds of smaller streams form an extensive network of channels. This place, the Ganges Delta in the northeast of India, is home to mangrove forests that are by far the largest in the world. World heritage is about more than just culture. It's also about protecting the world's unique natural treasures. India's most important UNESCO World Natural Heritage Site, the Sundarbans National Park, is located at the point where India's mighty rivers, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, flow together. Mangroves even thrive in the salt water that mixes with the fresh water of the rivers here. Sundarbans, a Bengali name, means beautiful forest, and it's an ideal refuge for many endangered species of animals. This place is a perfect hunting ground for the spotted owlet. The lesser adjutant specializes in wetlands. There are more than 270 species of birds in the Sundarbans. The Sundarbans covers more than 10,000 square kilometers of territory, and during the floods it is flushed with seawater. It is home to enormous saltwater crocodiles, rare species of heron, and tiny mudskippers. The primeval ghost crab has its sanctuary here, as does the chital deer. This is where you'll find the world's largest mangrove forests, and it's also home to India's national animal, the Bengal tiger, an endangered species. Unfortunately, this majestic creature is still mercilessly hunted by poachers, despite the fact that killing these magnificent animals is considered a blasphemy in India. The tiger is the mount of the goddess Durga, who uses her weapons to defend humanity's divinity and to battle demons. But it would appear that the demons that drive humanity to devastate its natural environment are very difficult to defeat. No one knows exactly how many Bengal tigers still survive today. Estimates suggest that there may be fewer than 200 in the Sundarbans. The tigers drink the brackish water, which has very high salt content, and that reduces their life expectancy, so they're facing a double threat from humans and from nature. The Sundarbans region has been under growing threat from climate change. If the sea level continues to rise at such a rapid pace, it will throw off the delicate equilibrium of this unique biosystem. The Ganges, which flows into the Sundarbans, is one of the longest rivers in the world at 2,600 kilometers. It has its source in a western Himalayan glacier, crystal clear and high up in the mountains, and that's exactly where we're headed now, up the river to Shimla, the capital of the state of Himachal Pradesh. On the horizon are the Himalayan foothills with their 8,000-meter mountains. The area around Shimla used to be dotted with nothing but mountain cabins and nomads' tents. Today, the Queen of Hills, as Shimla is locally known, is inhabited by almost 200,000 people. In the 19th century, the British came, and the English viceroy had a palace built on a commanding hill in English Renaissance Revival style. Suddenly there was hustle and bustle. Half-timbered houses and a traditional Anglican church were erected in the Himalayas. Shimla became an exclusive mini-empire for the Brits, with afternoon teas, garden parties and cricket matches with English architecture and gardens to match. And because the wives of the civil servants and officers were often left to their own devices here for long periods of time, Shimla soon became known as the capital city of adultery. It's the strangest feeling to visit this handsome but rather provincial Victorian English confection in the midst of an Indian landscape. You get the feeling that the British colonial rulers of India wanted to be here and not to be here at the same time. The Indian national leader, Nehru, found an interesting way to put it when he said, the British ultimately failed as colonial rulers because they failed to become Indian. Instead, they left landmarks of their own culture. There is, for example, northern India's second oldest Anglican church, Shimla's Christ Church, overlooking the central square where, at the time, local farmers and craftsmen offered their goods for sale. In the Indian plain, it can get unbearably hot, at least for Europeans. In the summer of 1864, Viceroy of India and representative of Queen Victoria, John Lawrence, decided in one fell swoop that the seat of the British colonial government should be transferred in the hot months of every year to a city in the mountains. That was Shimla. All the important civil servants had to move here to the foothills of the Himalayas. The entire bureaucracy was relocated, lock, stock and barrel, to higher altitudes. An endless caravan of over 20,000 porters dragged the civil servants' possessions across the country in high summer and then back again when the summer was over. To put an end to this drudgery, construction on a train line from the city of Kalka to Shimla began in the late 19th century. Like India's other mountain railways, the Kalka-Shimla Railway is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. On its 100 kilometers of track, it climbs 1,500 meters skyward, which is why the trip takes nearly 6 hours. But the train offers spectacular views of the Himalayan foothills and wooded valleys. This stretch of railway only has one track, so the journey can't continue until the oncoming train has reached the station. The track gauge is just 762 millimeters, which is why it's also known as a toy train. The railways are as much a part of India as the Taj Mahal or the Ganges, and just like the rivers, they are a lifeline for this country, a piece of living history to be experienced firsthand. This railway is one of the finest legacies of the British colonial rulers in India. It's a masterpiece of British engineering. It was completed in 1903. The Kalka-Shimla Railway, with its 864 bridges and its more than 100 tunnels, is listed in the Guinness Book of Records as possessing the steepest incline in altitude worldwide. And I must say, this particular stretch is just a little bit hair-raising. Every day, on average, more than 8,000 trains travel 80,000 kilometers of track, carrying more than 23 million passengers. Cargo trains transport 3 million tons of goods and more. The total distance India's trains travel every day is 3 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon. Indian traditions are partly responsible for this. People are always traveling for religious festivals and family celebrations. After the trip on the Kalka-Shimla Railway, it's time for some relaxation. And an ancient Indian invention is just the ticket. Yoga. The goal of yoga is to exercise control over your body and mind. Maybe yoga really does allow you to overcome physical limitations, to think without thoughts.
Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve shantu nirag bhave.
In the theory of yoga, a human being is a traveler moving through life in a horse-drawn cart. The body is the cart, the mind is the driver, and the 5 senses are the 5 horses pulling the cart. The soul is the passenger, and the harness controlling the whole thing is known in the Sanskrit language simply as yoga. Yoga is much more, of course, than a relaxation technique for stressed-out modern people. It's said that the first yogis were part of the advanced civilizations of the Indus River Valley over 5,000 years ago. We can see this on ancient depictions. For a long time, this kind of meditation, this self-improvement technique, only existed in India, where it was closely linked to Hinduism. Then, in the 19th century, Yogi Swami Vivekananda set yoga on the path to its current world hegemony. He made a case for Hinduism as a world religion and heightened global awareness of India's cultural importance. We are visiting Yogi Rakesh Pandey, one of the most famous Indian masters. He practices yoga as a science.
Yogam sharanam gacchami. Om Shanti 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 Om.
Guruji, yoga is more than just a bodily discipline. Where does the thought behind yoga come from?
This came from the Vedas, in Indian Vedas. In the Vedas have the divided 4 parts: Rig Veda, Sham Veda, Atharva Veda and Yajur Veda. So in the Rig Veda, all my yogis, all my saints, rishis, munis says, you do the yoga. Old time, at that time, yoga is not this only the exercise. At that time, yoga is a philosophy, yoga is a lifestyle.
Many of the asanas, the position you showed us, look like dance. And you sang before and after, you chanted musically before and after the positions. Is there a connection between yoga and music?
Yoga is like the music, the rhythm of the body, the melody of the mind, harmony of the soul, create a symphony of life. This is yoga.
I can think of no other country as enthralling and baffling as India. Nothing is straightforward. The riddles are never resolved. The sacred sites of Hinduism suggest a deep reverence for the natural environment, yet one also finds traces of a certain disregard for the upkeep of natural spaces and even for the bodies of water that many consider holy. Sewage from private households and industrial plants, rubbish deposited along thousands of kilometers of river, avalanches of garbage, and not just on the outskirts of the cities. Just over there, there's a temple. Down here on the street, the cows are doing their business. There's rubbish everywhere. In India, holiness and dirt are often found close together. And I think the reason for this lies partly in the Hindu concept of Maya, which means literally veil, but signifies the idea that the world that we can see and touch is not the thing that matters most, that the truly essential things lie in the domain of the invisible. India gives wings to our imagination. It fuels our dreams, but so much that matters is hidden from view. Its history has never moved in straight lines. It's not an easy place to understand, and that's exactly why I'll be back. No one who comes to India could fail to be astonished by the diversity and number of its cultures, aptly represented by its UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Sites. India is not a country, it's a country of countries, a civilization. Buddhism, a world religion, had its origins here, and Hinduism is present almost everywhere now, thanks to the global reach of the Indian diaspora. But unlike Europe, India has never sought to reshape the world in its own image. Instead, the world came to India, and everything that immigrants and conquerors brought to this subcontinent was absorbed and transformed by a society that was open but never servile. The thread of continuity with a deep past was never entirely broken, and the result is a nation unique in the richness of its contrasting colors and layers.